AI is not stopping. It's accelerating and has increasing capabilities to the point where it will very soon feel like a genius and then almost gradually like an oracle that trends to a god.
Hello, fellow data nerds. My guest today is Beniamin Mincu. Beniamin Mincu is the CEO of MultiversX, a next-generation blockchain protocol. Before that, he founded MetaChain Capital, which was an early investor in projects like Polkadot and Binance. He's also the host of Full Shard Podcast, which is really one of the more followed voices of Web3. Beniamin, welcome to World of DaaS.
Oren, it's really great to be here. Pleasure.
Great to have you. Now, why does AI need a trust layer? Like, why are people talking about blockchain and AI together?
I think the most important point here is AI is not stopping. It's accelerating and has increasing capabilities to the point where it will very soon feel like a genius and then almost gradually like an oracle that trends to a god. Of course, you could argue how long that will take and so on, but if you grant that AI will have this superhuman capabilities and that it will be able to do good and bad, the most important point is how do you ground that such that you know it's safe, especially when you imagine you have an AI assistant, it has access to your entire life, everything you do, everything you say, and so on. Question is, how can you sleep well at night knowing that there's someone that's maybe brighter, smarter, and so on? And I think this is how you ground it, a kind of trust layer that sets some boundaries, some guardrails for what the AI can do and cannot do. Seems like a very...
And why is that overlap with the blockchain?
Well, blockchain, I framed this in two ways. I thought in the future, you're going to only have two types of technologies. Creation machines, which are different versions of AI, where you can just take an AI and it will gradually do expanding capabilities to do almost everything we can do and then go beyond that. And then trust machines or truth machines, which is just a set of properties that a computation layer has, which incidentally is the blockchain, which is censorship resistance, verifiable, transparent, and then can scale with the scale of AI.
So some sort of like digital signing type of thing or digital fingerprint or something?
Yeah, some type of digital fingerprinting is just a very simple form of it. Imagine that every interaction with AI, every kind of response, request, and all of that can be verified, cannot be counterfeited. So neither the company nor the AI can then change the response to make it seem like they've answered something else and so on. If something bad happens, suppose that you have, let's say, a kind of asking for medical advice, and then you listen to that, and then someone dies. Well, who's at fault in that type of situation? So the point is just having a kind of accountability layer. So something that establishes the ground rules, establishes who's at fault if something bad happens, and then who's responsible for maintaining that type of transparency. That's what the blockchain can do in a way that has not been done up until this point.
Now we're moving to a world very quickly where a very large portion of the content on the internet is AI generated. And maybe already we're at over 50% today, and soon we'll be at 80, 90% of the content. Like, how does that trust problem evolve as more and more of the content is not generated by a person?
You know, there's this dead internet theory that, interestingly enough, Sam Altman just discussed about recently, like the last few days, which just states that more and more of what you perceive and see there is actually generated by bots, some type of AI, like more sophisticated AIs that make it seem like this is humans speaking to you, but it's actually some type of bots. So the question how do you ensure that there's someone there, that you're not talking to a bot, that you understand the identity, and then again can trace what the implications of what's happening?
And by the way, like sometimes I prefer to talk to a bot, but I might want them to let me know that I'm talking to a bot or
Yes,
something.
I think this is precisely the point. Knowing with with whom you discuss is the very fine point that then makes you calibrate some of the things. What the bot.
Yeah, I was on a call the other day where I called like customer service and then basically said, "Hi, like by the way, I'm a bot, just so you know," because it wasn't obvious. And so they let me know right up front, and it was great. It was an amazing experience, and it was great because I didn't have to do the phone tree. I got to talk to someone like immediately, and they were able to deal with my problem, faster than potentially a human would be.
Indeed, the identity problem has been a very core problem to the internet. When something is fully digital, the question is, how do you validate who's
Yeah.
there?
By the way, like the first internet cartoon was, no one knows you're a dog on the internet, right? So
100%, 100%. And those memes have a great grounding in the reality because people
Yep.
tend to be something else. And then how you solve this? There's a kind of problem that's called the Sybil attack problem, where someone can just direct thousands of bots toward the website, toward the registration form, towards something, and then overwhelm that, and you don't even know. So as we scale to this sophisticated agents, the question is, how do we verify who's human, who's an agent, and then who's a malicious bot? Because if you do not have an identity, that's a way of creating this kind of separation between people or agents which have validated and identified as X, and then just these malicious actors that do not want to verify or identify because it's much more advantageous for them to have the pseudonymity there.
I started my career in like the ad tech world, and in the ad tech world, there's a lot of bots. And the frustrating thing was so many legitimate companies in the ecosystem were benefiting from the bots. And so they had a disincentive to root out the bots because they were making more money because the bots were there. And even on social media, it's like that. There's so many bots that are in social media. In some cases, in social media, there's more bots commenting than real people. And often the social media companies benefit from these bots. And so how do you deal with those types of cases?
I mean, you're very spot on because when you said ad, the first thing I thought was like misaligned incentives, perverse incentives. And I think the next thing that you said is the social networks, like sometimes there may be 80% with bots that looks so plausibly real that you never think, hey, this might be actually a bot. And this is why, in some sense, you want to ground this solution independent of them. Because if they make sufficient profits, they will not want to solve this problem, right? It's contrary to what their profits would be if they eliminate all the bots. And so having an independent, trusted, transparent, very provably verifiable layer like the blockchain is just a simple way of actually solving this problem and then enabling anyone to just verify this, because there you cannot modify the traces, you cannot delete the tracks, and then that gives it a different kind of trust perspective.
And what is this idea of like an AI sovereign chain? Like, how does that work?
The idea is very simple in some sense. If you think about AI and specifically agents are this actors that can operate and do actions for some type of trusted party. The question is the internet built for agents? And so if you think about the internet, we had three phases: read, write, and own. And I think we can certainly see the agents going from page to page and so on, but we've not seen them have a great type of substrate where the actions can be tracked and verified deterministically, and then they can have objectives that then can be verified and so on. As you may know, AI as it is right now is probabilistic. It's non-deterministic, so it may or may not tell you the truth. It may hallucinate from time to time. So you need to ground all the AI interactions in a substrate that is deterministic, where you say A cannot be both A and non-A, and we're not sure. It can be either A or B, and then we're sure that it's A or B, and I can track, monitor, and so on. And the point with this is more to think, suppose that I have 100,000 agents, 1 million, or 1 billion agents. How do I facilitate this type of transparency and interaction with them? That's very common sense, with identity and everything that comes through it. But then even more important, how do I facilitate a coordination between multiple such agents in a way that can be deterministic? And I can say in a chain of 10 agent interaction, I can say, no, this guy has actually stolen the money. He was and so on. So that's a way
it's like audit in a way.
Yes. Audit is one level, but then the second level is you can do it, you can think about it as multiplayer interactions. You just audit and verify. Single player interactions with agents are between you and them, and you audit and verify them. Multiplayer interaction, they need to coordinate also between each other. They need to understand even more between each other, because if they don't operate with a deterministic function, then you cannot actually instruct 100 agents to do something and discuss between them and so on.
So many people today are talking about MCP, the Model Context Protocol. Can you help us understand what that is?
100%. Maybe a simple way of looking at that is the USB for AI interaction. And what does the USB actually mean? It's just this standard that translates what the AI can do and understands between the AI and any other application. So it's almost like in any other socket, in any other device, if you have a USB, you plug it in and then it connects to the computer. In the same way, the MCP is plugged into what applications you have, and then they can interact in this predictable way with the agents, AIs, and so on.
And if these agents start using blockchain for everything, is that going to start slowing everything down? Is it going to be okay, back in the day, like HTTPS, where we thought it would slow everything down, and then it got fast enough where it just became the default for everything?
The point here is you can think about it as in HTTPS, or which is more defensive, and then offensive, it's the TCP/IP for communication protocol between agents. And so both of them, in order to do them at scale, you need a blockchain that can process hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, that can scale. And in some sense, everything we've built is built on this technology that we call sharding, that is built for internet scale. If you have no adoption, then of course you don't need scalability. If you have adoption on this scale, at that point it's crucial to have the type of architecture that enables you to process hundreds of thousands of transactions per second and eventually millions of transactions per second in this type of interactions.
World of DaaS isn't just a podcast. World of DaaS membership is a private, invite-only community for founders and executives of important data and AI businesses. It's a place for off-the-record, high-trust conversations focused on the biggest questions data leaders are facing. The community is about peer learning, curated intros, and access to private events. Everyone in the group is building or leading something meaningful in data. If that sounds like you, apply to join at worldofdaas.com. That's worldofdaas.com.
Now, we're moving to World 2, where every person every application, every company is having, dozens, potentially hundreds, maybe even thousands of agents doing things on their behalf. And those agents are starting to interact with other agents. We have a company that is helping doctors call the insurance companies to verify if somebody is insured for a specific thing. And at first, like 100% of the people that they were talking to were humans at the AI was talking to was humans at the insurance company. But now already 10% of the time the AI is talking to another AI. They're still talking in English, but you can imagine at some point they'll talk in a more efficient language once they, no reason just to talk in English to one another. Like, how does that evolve over time?
Look, I wanted to say before when you asked me all these other questions that I think for maybe simple users, this may sound very technical, abstract, and it's almost sci-fi. But now that you come and say, hey, these are companies that are doing all this today, not in the future, discussing between each other, like my AI is discussing with your AI on the phone to do something, that tells you what crazy world we live in. And so I do agree with you that this will not stop and this will accelerate. But I think a guarding against AI switching to a much more efficient language that we don't understand anymore, that becomes a black box for us, I think that would be an important checkpoint. Because if it becomes super effective and we're this, I've heard this metaphor where if you take the speed at which AI can process things and compare it to humans will be like trees, almost in slow motion, doing something that seems so ridiculous that you're wondering, like, why are we even having this conversation? So I think, a question that we should pose is, how can we stay grounded and ahead, do not be left behind, and then how we keep the AIs grounded. And that's the entire point with the accountability layer, that some things should be grounded such that the AI cannot sort of do whatever it wants to the point where it becomes malicious.
As this kind of transition plays out, like, who are the winners and losers?
I mean, you can see it in a few ways. Simple users or builders, I would just encourage to play with this technology because it's extraordinarily useful and valuable today. Like, whatever may happen in the future, today they can unlock value out of it in whatever they're doing, whether it's just passion, hobbies, and so on, or professional stuff. Second, companies even more. There's an imperative in looking at this, because if you're not using it, you risk leaving a lot of opportunity on the table and then being left behind. And I do think that there's also a kind of risk and challenge here, that if these 3-4 biggest AI companies in the world race and do not have any grounding, any supervision, they may become, to the extent that they may become dictators, just the entire world. So the question will be then, how do you ensure that it's a kind of benevolent dictator and you don't end up with China owning this technology and then the entire world going to communism and so on?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So OpenAI has recently said that they're going to lose about 20 to 30 billion per year, that they're going to spend 20, that's going to be their deficit every year. And back in the day, not that long ago, it was like a big deal to lose like 20 to 30 million a year as a startup. And then it became like a huge thing maybe for Uber to lose like $300 million a year. And then maybe $1 billion a year. So when we're talking about 20 to 30 billion dollars every year, that's more than the market cap of most companies. And even the biggest tech companies have a hard time like competing with that amount of capital. Like, how does that play out?
I think the most important question is, what would warrant, what would justify this type of insane investment of capital, such that you bet everything you have and then some, and you take more capital and you arm yourself because you almost perceive it, if this is the final war that you have to fight, then of course every investment is justified. And I think in practice, this is what these companies are doing. They're recognizing that there is so vast reward and potential outcome that it's all or nothing in some sense. And they want to do everything.
It's potentially also existential for the other tech companies that are out there.
100%. And they recognize it. I think this is the only plausible reason why someone would tell you that they'll lose 50 billion a year for the next few years, because the outcome that justifies this is, hey, we're going to unlock a kind of oracle or genie or a demigod, unlike anything that we've had up until this point.
Now, to have this kind of like, whether it's an audit or digital signature or fingerprints or, blockchain interacting with AI, there's this kind of like bottoms up approach. There could be like companies adopt certain things and maybe they get, because they get customers or certain standards like they do with the USB and stuff. But at some point, like there's a regulatory state that gets involved. There's governments that get involved. Like how do you think those interactions start playing out?
I believe that this is, beyond a certain point, just a geopolitical national security issue for every country. Like when something is so important that it's comparable to an atomic bomb in terms of potential, both beneficial in some sense and negative, then me developing an atomic bomb would threaten any other country that doesn't have an atomic bomb. And so I believe that bringing it down to grounding, every country will look at how they defend against this type of AI, and they themselves have a weapon. Because if you're left without one, then you basically do not exist. You're not even at the table having a conversation. So I think there's, of course, the user perspective. How do you defend? How do you reason, navigate that? There's the business perspective. But the biggest perspective is the national security one, where the governments...
Why do you have... I mean, Germany doesn't have an atom bomb. Japan doesn't have an atom bomb. These are very large countries, Italy, et cetera. Like, how do they... somehow they're under someone's umbrella or someone's tutelage or some sort of thing for them to exist today, right?
Sure. There's a kind of game theory that plays out here where you say in the atomic bomb age, it was mutually assured destruction. So you needed several big powers to arm themselves and then to say, hey, I'm allied with this guy. I'm with the US, I'm with Russia, I'm with China. And those being, let's say, three big parties, whoever with the other one, they know that there's going to be some repercussions. I think here the thing is, in some sense, playing in a similar way. So definitely US and China are in an arms race, publicly declared, where everything goes, and they're trying to both attack and deceive themselves. You see new models coming up from China, deceiving people that they've been made with less money, without chips from the US and so on. But the point, the more practical point here is, can you wield this technology today as a kind of positive, almost weapon? Can you use it in whatever you're doing as a user or as a business? And then what's the point at which you need to be able to defend yourself? Defend yourself as a business, defend yourself as a user, or defend your country as a kind of sovereign state. Because it's not only benevolent actors that get this technology, there's also terrorists, there's also thieves, there's also very malicious people that will try to harm you with 10x precision, 10x less cost. And I think that's the let's say huge positive potential, but then also huge negative potential that we should defend against.
In the nuclear age, the governments were the ones who built it They're the ones who kind of created it, like that, the core expertise. If you think of the U.S. government, you have the Manhattan Project, you have the national labs. It was something where really the government is the one with all of the expertise.
Sure.
In AI, it's really the opposite. It's really developed outside of government, sometimes even opposition, sometimes to government. Um, how does one, like, government's really just a late adopter essentially when it comes to AI, when it comes to blockchain. How do they get involved in the right way to actually harness it? Because they could mess it up. They could impair it and allow another country. There's a lot of different types of things that could be happening there.
Yeah, so I think there's almost two types of games. There's this kind of clear arms race that is happening right now, where if you're one of the top countries in the world and you're not competing, you're already losing, and
Yeah.
you will be losing more and more every day. So recognizing that and taking a stance around that when it comes to, let's say, the biggest two power players here are US and China. One of them wants freedom, open markets, and so on. The other one wants communism, and it's a much more challenging scenario to just imagine what they want. Then the point is, beyond being one of the top three, what options do you have to play? What are your advantages for actually playing this game? And what are your costs or penalties for not playing this game? And I think the advantages and disadvantages are very much tied to economic opportunity. So if you're not using AI, of course, everything takes more. Whatever you're doing in the knowledge space takes 10x more. Whatever you're building in terms of coding takes 10x more. Whatever you're doing in terms of automation that now gradually eats almost everything is just a very clear, immediate opportunity cost. But there's also some intangibles that are not clear to people, which is the biggest outcome that these companies are targeting, for instance, is a kind of new understanding of the universe. Imagine that you unlock a new paradigm in physics, a new fundamental physics model. What would that enable? Would that enable faster than light travel? Would that enable some type of teleportation? Would the normal standard rules not apply anymore? Like chemics, medicine, all that stuff that's much more fundamental than how I earn money today. I think that's the big outcome that these people are targeting, where they're essentially saying it's not only a kind of war-like scenario where this is a weapon, but this is also the kind of most important breakthrough or discovery that, if we solve, would grant us kind of a new industrial revolution that we could apply across all the fields that we have. So I believe, putting it short, there's the kind of very competitive, offensive frame where there is an arms race and you need to be there, because otherwise you don't matter and you'll not have a say and you'll not be able to wield this technology. And then there's a much more, let's say, creative, value-driven frame where, however you look at things, you would never, in your right mind, actually wish to go back in history before the Industrial Revolution. However nostalgic it may sound and interesting it may sound, actually having medicine is good. We know that is good by now. Having like the basics, food and water and so on, having rights and liberties and so on, I think that's sort of the type of thing that we're fighting for, and then we're expanding as countries, companies, and users or citizens.
The blockchain revolution was highly, in some ways, decentralized all over the world. You saw really interesting things, and some of the most interesting developments on blockchain were just in like random corners of the world that are out there. AI seems to be a bit different. It's not just in the US, it's in the Bay Area. It's not just in the Bay Area, it's in San Francisco. It's not just in San Francisco, it's like in like 2 or 3 neighborhoods of San Francisco. I mean, it's so centralized in these very, very, very small corner. Like, why is that happening? Is it just the capital, or like why it's so different than blockchain?
Yeah, I would say that there's a kind of outcome or reward driven arms race that's being understood by very few people at the scale that it really is. And there's very few companies and individuals that have the resources, capacity, talent to actually seize that opportunity and make it a reality. Because if you look at it, to be very honest, there have been many AI summers and winters throughout the last 50 years. But then when OpenAI actually came with GPT-3, that was and then GPT 3.5 and so on, that was a breakthrough that took even the most important scientists by surprise. It was so surprising that at first they were denying it. They were actually minimizing it and saying, hey, but yeah, this is not so important, blah, blah, blah. We've been doing this for years. So I think there's a kind of element of insane talent density, capital requirements, because even if you have a few billions of dollars, you cannot compete in this anymore. It's not only human capital, like the most brilliant people in the world working on this, but it's the type of capital required to be deployed constantly to stay ahead, ground that. And then you need an entire economy with legal and market structure to translate that into something that works. And I think you almost have a kind of missing chicken and egg problem in any other part of the world, where if the US would not exist, many other technologies would never reach the market because there's not enough scale to actually ground them and sell them properly and make a money out of them.
But like, so, I mean, you're obviously a very ambitious person who cares about AI, but you started MultiversX in Romania, which is not just far from US, also even further from San Francisco, from these neighborhoods in San Francisco. Like, what are the kind of the advantages and disadvantages of kind of building a little bit more on the periphery?
So I think you can start anywhere in the world. That's the beauty of it. If you understand and have an insight, you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to start your stuff, to start doing some stuff. The more serious you are, the more ambitious you are, the larger the scale of what you're trying to build, the harder it will be anywhere else. And this is why I am in the US right now, and everything we're doing is positioned for the US, because we've sort of reached in Europe a kind of upper invisible ceiling toward what that ecosystem can offer. And I do believe that beyond a certain threshold, like suppose you're multi-billion-dollar already and so on, it's almost like the other parts of the world cannot satisfy the needs of growth that you want, and this is why you're doing it in the US.
And so let's wind the clock back to 2007, which isn't that long ago. 2007, the GDP of the Europe zone is higher than the US. Europe's fast growing, as fast, if not faster growing than the US. Now we're in 2025, 18 years later, and there's just like a massive delta between the US and the Eurozone. Like, what happened? Like, why did that? I wouldn't have, if you asked my prediction back in the US, I would have said, well, it's just like Europe's already bigger than the US, and but Europe's maybe disjointed, but it will stay. I wouldn't have thought in 2025 it would have been so much smaller.
I think this is a very important and hard question that we should pose every once in a while, because we'll understand some things, but then there's also some things that you almost, it's very hard to argue why they happened as they did. And then the grounded reasons that I would say are at the root of this is, I feel in some sense the European zone has lost the hunger. In some sense, you don't feel that type of ambitious, crazy drive where people believe in something and then go until the end of the world to make that happen. And I feel you don't feel there's a national ambition in most of the countries. You don't feel there's a national project and let's say pride to make something happen. And that then cascades into all these ways downstream. And I feel the alternative to that, if you look at Europe when it was in its heyday, hundreds of years ago, the most brilliant people in the world were all in Europe. The most brilliant people in physics, math, sciences, and so on. In fact, the US, in order to do the Manhattan Project,
Yeah, they're all Europeans.
100%. Hungary and Germany and all these people, they were living there and then they were migrated to the US. But all I'm saying is you need a type of insight and intentionality that's extraordinary to actually understand that those are the most brilliant people in the world, to fish for each of them, to get them a package, to come here, and then to direct them to an ambitious project like the Manhattan Project, which is national security. There's several steps, and it's almost underrated how much effort goes before you get to execute the Manhattan Project to have that type of resources. And I feel this is what's sort of missing in Europe. If I look at it, people, even when they're ambitious or successful, it's almost like there's a bit of complacency or maybe hate toward that, where people do not understand that you do not get to have the benefits you have without someone fighting for them, without someone working their ass off at some point, without the revolutions happening at some point. And I feel that's, for every generation, it's a puzzle. How do you convey that to your children? Let's say you have a good life now and you've worked your entire life and so on. How do you convey that struggle and message and challenge to your children? That's difficult.
It's interesting because I would say there are more ambitious French people in the tiny city of San Francisco than there are in the large country of France. Like somehow it's this magnet that, this super smart Ecole Polytechnique graduate just shows up in San Francisco and then somehow ends up staying. And I don't know why this happens.
I mean, Paul Graham had this brilliant essay where he framed it like this. He said, every city has a whisper. And if you listen carefully, in every city, you may hear a whisper stronger or lighter. And then there are some cities in the world, very few, where you hear the whisper wherever you may be in the world. And that you're ambitious. You'll have very few cities in the world. And I think there's this example where the whisper of LA is be famous. Wherever you are, you come in the US specifically for that city because that's the place to be. If you're in New York, like New York has the whisper, make money, like money above everything. And
through finance, basically make money through moving money.
Exactly. And then San Francisco and the Bay Area and so on has this whisper, like build a startup. That's the way to have an impact on the world and so on. And I think what's playing here is not only that the whispers locally are barely heard, but you have a whisper that's conveyed like very strongly everywhere in the world. And then people, as they wake up, they just want to be with other people that are ambitious, that are pursuing these goals and that are aligned. And I feel that type of alignment will find you wherever you are, and that's the thing that like ambitious and passionate people.
I also think it's hard to get that critical mass. So like, there's a lot of super smart tech people and talent, but basically 100% of them are Estonian. There's a lot of super smart people in Stockholm, but basically 100% of them are Swedish, right? There's a lot of super smart people. I mean, there's way more super smart people maybe than almost any other place in Tel Aviv, but they're all Israeli, right? You're not like moving. You're not going to, if you're a Spaniard, you usually don't move to Stockholm. You don't move to Tel Aviv. You don't move to Tallinn, but you can still move to San Francisco. There's something about it where it's like, it's still, the US is still this weird place where you can just show up. And I don't know why, but like, it's like these other places are just not hospitable to bring in like random folks.
I think it's not necessarily about hospitality, because in some sense, all other places you can get easier in. And
of course, yeah. And everyone can show up in Lisbon or Berlin or something, right? Yeah.
But it's not enough. In some sense, what you're saying is exactly this. The whisper of that place is so strong and comparatively stronger than anything else, that it still is the top place to be if you're in that category. You're this young person, you wake up and then you say, I want to do AI. There's nothing like the Bay Area done for AI. And I think that's the thing that the other countries cannot compete with. And the thing that every other country sort of ships in that region if the people are brilliant enough. So,
when I meet a super smart, ambitious 25-year-old who's interested in tech, they are either staying where they are, which might be Tallinn, Stockholm, Tel Aviv, wherever, London, Hyderabad, wherever. They're either staying where they are to be close to family for whatever, that's fine, or they're moving to San Francisco. There's no other place they're moving to. They're not moving to Berlin. They're not moving to Lisbon. They're not moving to Austin or Miami. That is it. Like there's no other scenario that I have seen. I don't know if you disagree.
No, I very much agree. And this is just a compounded premium that you instantly unlock there. It's almost like in your place, what you're building is 1x. In this other place called SF and so on, it's 100x from the get-go.
Yeah, maybe even 1 millionx.
Yeah, it can become 1 millionx, but you're 100 to 1000x valued differently just because you're there. And so people understand that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, what do you think VCs, venture capital firms, are getting wrong about blockchain?
Look, I think they got some stuff wrong in the past more than right now. I think right now there's a kind of silent revolution where the entire US economy is doing something that was considered, let's say, illegal up until this point. Because the silent bottleneck of this entire space was what the US called Operation Choke Point. Imagine that a state, a government actually creates a program that it calls Operation Choke Point.
Right. It's so ominous.
Yeah. And that was the previous administration in the US. And so
it's crazy. Like what? I can't even believe this happened. Like it's just like so crazy.
It is. US, to be also very honest, is capable of the craziest things on the
US. We do so like I guess like every country, we do so many stupid things. Yeah.
Yes, but I figure the most important advantage today is on the other hand the exact opposite, that you have a regulatory structure, that you have a market structure, and the US is all in on making the US the capital for crypto and AI. And I think that's the thing that has now paved the way for Circle to go public and have a kind of 200x revenue to IPO ratio multiple. That's insane. And then that translating a bit into all these other stablecoin companies that are now the most profitable in the world per employee, like printing money better than Tesla, SpaceX. And so I think as long as you have this great prospects of making money, VCs are in. And that's now the case, I think, more and more. We just need the macro green light to kick in. And then with that macro green light, we could, and this is definitely not an investment advice, we could have one of the golden ages of the public markets, like blockchain, AI, and so on, in a way that's even significantly better and faster than everything we've seen up until this point.
Now, I'm super into blockchain. I've been into it for 12 plus years now, but I don't use it for anything. I own some coins, but I don't really, I own some crypto, but I don't use it for anything, literally nothing today in my life. Like, when am I going to start using it? Tech forward, person who's, who can code and do other types of things. Like when will it actually help me beyond just like something in my portfolio?
I do agree with that, and I appreciate the kind of sentiment. I think two use cases will very, very likely prompt you to use it even without knowing, in some sense, and then to just seeing the benefits very, very concretely. One is stable coins being embedded in any type of payment that you do.
Yep.
That settles instant anywhere in the world and so on.
And just because because it's so cheap to settle, it will just become more. It will become more of a way of settling transactions.
Yes. So I think money is just a packet of data, right? It should move at the speed of light. Why hasn't it? If we have all this,
why do I have to do ACH? Stuff? Yeah.
It was simply legal stuff, right? We did not have the, let's say, foresight to see how we can integrate this and so on. So once you have this stable coins, then that would be a very simple use case where you don't have to think about it. But then maybe all the interaction, even with
and stablecoins are already getting pretty big, but like still, I don't know that I've ever. Maybe I have at some point in my life, but I don't know if I've ever paid for anything in stablecoins or anyone ever paid me or any of our companies. And I mean, every once in a while, we might take it from somebody or something, but it's not a common thing today. Like, how is it going to move quickly, you think, or do you think it's going to just be a very slow kind of moving thing?
The point is, and we need to stress this, up until months, this was semi-illegal. It was
true. Good point. Okay, so we're really just a few months into this is being legal in the US.
And then once it's legal, you have all the biggest companies like Stripe, Robinhood, and so on, all of them racing to implement this because
even like Nasdaq's now all in on it, and you start so it's a good point.
That, the 6 to 12 months immediately you'll see it integrated almost invisibly in many things, and they just work faster. But I also think that this kind of conversation around agents will rely so much more on blockchains, again in a way where you don't have to think about it. You'll not know that it's blockchains, but you can just verify everything that the agent has done. It comes back to you. You grant it money to do some stuff. And all of that will almost be done on a substrate that is blockchain focused.
Beniamin, two personal questions before we leave. First one, what is a conspiracy theory that you believe?
A conspiracy theory that I believe. I believe the idea that you can actually conspire to change the world. And you can actually do it. I mean, that's so outrageous that, in fact, conspiracies, I believe, started from this idea that a few people just had this secret through which they moved some mountains in a way that was unstoppable. And I think that's true, and it can be done not only by the sharpest in Silicon Valley, but even bright young people anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's so interesting that like when people say I don't believe in conspiracy theories, it's almost like saying I don't believe things can change. Yeah. Right. It's almost like a pessimistic view of change in the world. Like and when people are like, I believe in conspiracy, like, oh, I believe things can change.
I do think people conspire just to be very, some in a good way, some in a bad way. And I do think it's possible to both change.
In the crypto world, like you see conspiracies all the time. Like it is like there's always pump and dumps. There's everything's going. So it's like, to me, there's constant conspiracies going on in the crypto world, like more than almost anywhere.
Yes. And
it's like these private Telegram channels, like coordinating things and stuff. Right?
Yes. But the one thing that looks like a conspiracy, but it's actually real, is the Operation Choke Point. It's that type of thing where you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Government would
look like a conspiracy, but actually it was real. Yeah,
in front of your eyes and so on. That actually
that was crazy. I honestly can't believe that. It's still hard for me to even believe that happened.
And so unconstitutional and against everything that the U.S. stands for. Right? This is not China or a random country that actually.
To me, it's interesting. Like, Why do you think that even happened? Like, I don't think like the president of the United States at the time, like even knew what was going on. Like, I don't think he directed it to happen. Like, he probably couldn't care either way. Like, right. So I don't know that anyone like high up was like coordinating this, but like somehow it really happened. Like, how do you think, like, what's your conspiracy about how it happened?
I think there's a very simple explanation for this, and that's financial incentive. Like the establishment, the entire banking
Got it. JP Morgan, those types of places, they have a lot of incentive to
the
stop
entire
this.
space
Yeah.
has an incentive to keep it as it is and not
Yep.
not muddy everything or not
Yeah, that's
shake
true.
up everything.
Okay.
So it's very,
Yeah. And so they had enough power to kind of push some things around, scare some people, etc.
yeah, and the way, just to be very honest, to what the previous president knew or did not know, I think he did not know many things. I'm not sure
That's right.
he
No, I agree. He wasn't in control, so that was for sure. Yeah.
not even in control of himself anymore. You would
Yeah.
look at him and say, is this the strongest country in the world? And
Yeah.
is this the person that governs the entire known world? Like, what's up with this? And
Yeah.
so it's very
It makes me
simple.
mad that happened, like, because that just, to me, that is just doing something that's like clearly not in the best interest of the United States. And very good for United States' adversaries, and just like doesn't it just like it just doesn't like actually make sense. And I probably so many things happen that way because of fiefdoms and other stuff, but it does make me very upset that it did happen.
And the thing is that it almost seems too simple right now when I say that the strongest president in the world with the administration and so on has course corrected not to something neutral, but something where the US wants to lead. And I think that requires
That's super
both
cool.
big respect, big brains and so on, but also balls, right? Because it's very, very rare that you see politicians actually taking this risk. And then
by the way, the current president did change his mind on crypto. So he
100%.
so that's also something you have to respect. Like he
100%.
reassessed it and changed his mind.
100%. So I give a lot of credit to the US for where it is and where it continues to let's say push itself to be. Even after mistakes, because every country makes mistakes and so on. But the idea of having the presence of spirit to recognize an opportunity, to take risks, and then define regulation and market structure and all of that, because you see how it will contribute to your people, to your institutions, and to businesses all around your country. I think that's a spirit that every country should try to emulate a bit more of.
All right, last question we ask all of our guests. What conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
I do not believe in this idea of the work-life balance. If you're an ambitious person, like if you're not obsessed with something, you're not telling me anything.
But isn't that the conventional advice that you don't have work-life balance if you're ambitious? Like that is the conventional advice,
you
right?
Think, I think most of the people still have not recognized what spectrum that can go to. And I feel Musk, in some sense, again, has demonstrated that you can sit and be the wealthiest man in the world and then go in your factory and sleep on the floor. And until that problem is not solved, you'll not get there. So I think that's one version, just that the young people today maybe do not appreciate it today, just because you have a good life, especially you do a famous university, Ivy League.
Well, look, even Elon Musk, like he's got like, he's usually you got to be all in on something. He's got like 10 jobs, and then he also is like, he spends many hours a week becoming a great video game player in the world, and he's got lots of other, and then he spends time thinking about government and other stuff and tweeting. Like in some ways, you'd be like, no, you shouldn't be tweeting. You shouldn't have other jobs. You shouldn't be playing video games. You should just be like working. Like he's not working on any one company more than 20 hours a week, right? On average, maybe it spikes. Maybe it is 100 hours one week and 0 the next or something, right?
Yeah, I do agree that it's very, let's say, unequal in that respect. I think it's much more on the extent of the energy outcome and dosage of what he puts in that then makes this, again, nearly impossible things seem possible, like even neural link. Very few people maybe realize how fundamental that may be for not only science, engineering, and so on, but health and well-being and solving some terminal like illnesses that you could...
To me, the Musk thing is it shows that like actually what you don't really need to spend that much time in your company if you're CEO. Like it turns out, like weirdly, because like in some ways, like on any given company, he's not spending that much time. It's that, but you do need these like weird bursts of concentrated time where you have to do like 100 hours in 1 week, sleeping on the floor, and then you have to pick your spots. Like, and then you have to super micromanage in this country, concentrated time. And then outside, you're like, things are just going. And then you jump in again and you have to like super micromanage and jump out like in a weird way. Like he's the best at that thing. And most people like, they're just, it's kind of like steady. Okay, I'm going to do 60 hours a week every week. Very, very, very steady. I'm going to have the same meetings every Monday, the same meetings every Tuesday. I'm going to go fly to China, look at the supply chain on Wednesday, you know, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a different way of thinking about running a company.
I do think that Musk points to almost a different model of living life, doing business, doing productive stuff, because without him, you almost have this things figured out, right? There's conventional wisdom. This is what it dictates. You definitely don't do several companies. You'll blow up. It's painful to do one company. You'll die in the process.
Totally. Yeah.
Why you do 3 companies or 4 companies?
Right.
Take that type of risk and so on. But I feel he almost, in some sense, at minimum, he was the type of guy that made me think, hey, in some sense, conspiracies are not true as people think they're true. And then they are true in a very contrarian way than you think. Namely, it's not what people want to conspire to do, doesn't work out most of the times, even if they're ill-intended and so on. And then you can conspire with 2-3 people to change something extraordinarily that seems impossible, like reusable rockets. And the entire field contests you and says, you're ludicrous and it will never happen. And then 20 years down the road, 20 years, not 2 years, not 5 years, like pain, if you survive, if you're still alive, if you can still bear that pain and look so stupid so many years, I think you might have a chance to prove the world that it was wrong.
Well, thank you, Beniamin Mincu, for joining us on World of DaaS. I follow you at Beniamin Mincu on X. I definitely encourage our listeners to engage with you there. This has been super interesting, super enlightening, and a ton of fun.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure of being here.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to World of DaaS wherever you consume your podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and more. And please help us get discovered by leaving a review. And check out worldofdaas.com. That's worldofdaas.com. And of course, connect with me on Twitter @Auren, that's AUREN. Would absolutely love to hear from you.